I'm hoping to talk to you about this specific project, which is now luckily coming to its end and starting new beginnings, and also about the context in which it's been generated. So I'll start with a little bit of an introduction to you about Cretan Renaissance literature and the work Erotokritos within that, just trespassing or taking advantage of the interdisciplinarity that was offered by this conference to connect with classicists again. I must say that the Erotokritos is entering, is in a period which is now entering the focus, or at least the horizon of the TLG, so these texts are not outside our scope for all of us. Then I'm going to try to demo to you a bit of the new Erotokritos CD-ROM, and again to talk about the context, the larger context, the group called Neo-Graika Medievi that's been around since 1986 but only incorporated last fall, and to help plan with you, if possible, for a better future for that group and for classicists coming from that group, offers of whatever we can offer. So Cretan Renaissance literature, very little known in the West. El Greco, of course, in art, but not the literature. And it's the product of the occupation by Venice of Crete over about 400 years. And it's in the last century, the final century of that occupation, as you see the dates up to 1669, that the best literature comes from, with all kinds of representative genres. And authors, I will cite the name of Kornaros in red because he is the author of the Erotokritos romance, and in blue Hortatsis because he's one of the best known playwrights, and with his name are connected many plays, including the Erophili that you see in blue under works. And then I would like to mention the Sacrifice of Abraham, a religious play that is still going under the name of anonymous author. The language of these texts is the Cretan dialect of its period. What does that mean? Do we have a hold on it? Luckily, in English, there is, since 1991, a source that you can turn to hear about this period. Unfortunately, until then, Greeks wrote about this literature in their own language. The Erotokritos romance comes from about the time of Shakespeare. Some of this may sound familiar to classicists because it's a work that's 10,000 verses long approximately in stichic verse. It happens to be iambic meter. It happens to be not longs and shorts, but stressed, unstressed. There's a caesura in the lines. We have two hemistichs. And in this case, because we've advanced certain centuries, we have rhyming couplets. And we also, for the sake of Carolyn Higby, have enjambment. I thought I'd mention that here. The work is expressed in narrative by a poet, capitalized, and dialogue by many characters. Significantly named characters, including Erotokritos, the one tried in love, and Arethusa, little virtue, his maiden. 5 parts to the work, alpha through epsilon. Love and or physical conflict reflected in the odd books alpha, gamma, epsilon, mostly centering on the love story, and beta and gamma, the delta, the physical conflict. With book B, again, being different, in this case it contains a long joust with 14 participants. And the plot summary, just very briefly, Erotokritos, the son of a courtier, makes the mistake of falling in love with a 13-year-old princess, daughter of king. The setting is pagan Athens. King Heracles has only this daughter and certainly doesn't want to dispose of her or place her in the hands for marriage of a courtier's son. So though Erotokritos is successful in the joust in book B, by book Gamma he is being banished from the kingdom and sent away. In Delta, he gets to come back but in disguise, and he fights for the kingdom of Heracles and Athens against the Vlachs who have invaded. And in Epsilon, he gets his reward at the hand of the princess, and everybody's very happy. And the princess has to be pulled out of 5 years of prison in a room filled with hay where she's never washed out of her sorrow and not wanting to be attractive to any other man. Now we have a CD-ROM that's just about to be printed. as the disc spins. A takeoff on the book on which it's based, which you see on the right of your screen, a book with a Greek title but containing summaries in English of what it's about. And the edition on which this CD-ROM is based is the authoritative work, the authoritative last critical edition by Stylianos Alexiou. He's allowed us to take it into electronic format, and the text of the romance has been linked to the word tables and concordance that we had already published in the form of 4 volumes some years back, and we hope to get this out. So now I'm going to take you to the actual CD-ROM. So just give me a minute to exit here so I don't end up on the floor. This is a browser-based CD-ROM, and the resolution has gone sky high. If somebody can help me here. Will this reduce the...
Plus what?
Hit the plus one.
The green one.
The green one, okay, that's not going to send it away. Thank you. It's still a bit broad, but it's much better. Thank you. We have an English and a Greek interface. Please don't be insulted, but I think we'll go to the English interface. The texts and the tables will all be in Greek throughout, but the English interface, this is the first page of the CD, which is a hybrid CD for PC or Mac. Looks like this. And of course the introduction is philological. The technical notes are meant to help those of you who want to know how this project was worked out technically. Audio visuals for when one gets bored and wants to look at pretty pictures of the manuscript or hear a little music. And the central part that we'll go to now, just to show you, there is the whole text here in Polytonic Unicode. It didn't start out in Unicode, it started out in linguist software, Super Greek, converted, and access to the various parts of the work is gained by the ruler on the bottom. Returning to the table, the meat of the project is in the unit poems tables, and on the left one sees the menu of the available places to which one could navigate directly. Again, oh yes, well, I'm sorry, the resolution is again not as great as I'd like, but I guess you get the picture. Now the text is enhanced or annotated through grammatical links that have been added, grammatical tags, excuse me, that have been added to distinguish the homograph types, which are actually about a quarter of the entire text in number, so there are many, many of them. And if one were to hit on the word for eros, or one gets a choice of which table to choose to go to, and I'll take you to the table of lemmata and word forms so that you can immediately find how many times the lemma, eros, or erotas in modern Greek occurs, and the separate word forms. If one clicks here, one goes off to the concordance, and the concordance is set up by following context so that you can see, for instance, that there's a repetition of the phrase ton erota demeno, he's being held in bondage. What else there is, I'm being a little disconcerted by this resolution. I can't get quite to the end of the line on one screen, but I will take you out here to show you that there is access to the rhyme. Here we've got a rhyming couplet ending in vari, hari, and if one would normally see this without a projector, it would all be on one screen. By hitting the number of the line, one then gets the thrilling opportunity to talk about number of words in the line, and that can be added up. But one goes off to the rhyme table also, and exactly to the place where that hari occurred, that line 6. And then again, scrolling up, you can find all the quite numerous rhymes in ari, alphabetically set out. And when there are cases of rhymes that repeat, then that is reflected, of course, by the line numbers stacking up on the right. And here this arrow warns you that if you see the odd line containing kondari as its rhyme word and palikari in the matching even line, the arrow warns you that the opposite combination will also be found later in the somewhere else in the table. Let me just get us back to where we were. So this is the map of the linking of the tables. Some of them over on the right, as you can see, are independent and are frequency tables that have just been posted there and do not have links. And otherwise, the arrows indicate that in certain cases the tables direct, link in two directions or simply in one. I just had to put this in. It isn't significant at all, but I just felt I was the only person who didn't have any source code here. So I just couldn't take it. Because the technical side of this was prepared by 3 separate teams for me. The first team did it too quickly and had to be redone. So I've told you some of this, but I just wanted to list the features of this CD-ROM again. It does contain emendations to the critical edition with all respect to the great editor Stylianos Alexiou. He thought he had the 10,000 lines in his head, and he really didn't, and he's admitted now very graciously at age 92 that he's very glad we put this into the computer and I had gotten it all sized up for him. So now the emendations are mainly inconsistencies pointed out by the concordance. But we have not parsed the entire text. It's about 90,000 words, and that wasn't just part of our program yet. The rhyme tables, I wrote snowball programs to compose them. The technical notes were written by the technical team and show the various phases that this project went through. And the concordance, I just wanted to emphasize again, shows repeated phrases because of the fact that it's organized in order of following context. And just to give you a little bit of philology, if you don't mind, there are 47 trees or occurrences of tree in the whole romance, but only 3 of this whole phrase, sena dendrograms, under a tree. And who gets to sit there? This is not my own work, but I'm just summarizing. The 2 alter ego male protagonists sit there with fateful outcomes for each of them. And what has been done now by the opening of the recognition of what are the phrases and looking at this text non-linearly is we now can compare texts of the same period. And the common lines that had been sort of noticed are now being confirmed. And luckily what's happening in scholarship is that they're starting to move away from how many common lines do we have between these texts and are they therefore going to be thought of as being by the same author, to how do these lines function in the text. So here I've given you a very telling example, just so you get a little flavor of this word. For you was my body born into this earth, to give a terribly prosaic translation. So, said by Rotokritos to his young lady as he's being forced into exile. His only purpose in life was to be with her. And it's echoing a appalling Gothic tragedy from earlier in which the young princess says to her beloved, who is again a lowly courtier, my body was born for you in this world, and her beloved is taken out and his body is chopped up by her father. So there is a triangulated relationship between these 3 works that are listed at the bottom of the screen here, the romance Erotokritos and 2 plays, this Gothic Erophili and the religious play Sacrifice of Abraham. And this set of new approaches to how these common lines that may occur among these 3 is quite interesting to follow. And also much rhyme study has been done, and that is my work, trying to compare features of the rhyme and say something about the connections of these works. Again, the Sacrifice of Abraham is still counted as anonymous, so the question is where do we attach it? again, a token dendrogram from one of these rhyme studies. All the senior gentlemen scholars of Crete have always looked to me since I put these two texts into the computer saying, can you tell us now that the sacrifice of Abraham is by the same author as the Erotokritos? This is what they would like to hear. And unfortunately, when I looked at the parts of speech in the rhyme, and it was just one study, the Erophilion, the sacrifice of Abraham, that we know are not by the same author and could not possibly be so, clustered together, and it's probably an issue of genre. So we have to look elsewhere and keep moving along in our studies. And now the context of this CD-ROM, before the CD-ROM came along, what was there? There were print editions of contemporary texts. There were studies of contemporary texts. There was the magisterial medieval dictionary of Greek edited by Kriaras, who now is 105 and just went up 3 years ago for political office. But his dictionary has, for years, been stopped at P, or pi. And finally, this year, it leapt forward to Rho. And luckily, a team has taken over its dictionary, so I think we're going to see it, but it's been coming very slowly. So if you ever want to look up a word that's after those, there's no LSJ. There's nothing for this period. We just have to, you know, I used to send letters to people, and one of them's no longer with us, so it's a challenge. In 1986, a book, this was my first book in this field, with a concordance and world tables, came out based on the sacrifice of Abraham. The story of the humanities and computing, of course, is that it so much facilitated the work of the editors who've been trying for 20 years to make a new edition of the sacrifice of Abraham that they sped up their work. They tore my concordance to pieces by using it so much. 5 years later, they had their new edition, and now my printed concordance is no longer valid or doesn't represent the latest in scholarship. They gave me a copy of their new edition in saying on the front of it, we're very, very sorry, but you know, we've done this, and as revenge, I married one of them. So research together. Now, the group Neodraika Medievi may not, and rhyme tables, that was a glorious thing that didn't die with the coming of the new edition, because there was finally a scheme for doing rhyme table depiction, visual, you know, just putting it on the page for this period of modern Greek, early modern Greek. Others have taken other works from that period and are making rhyming tables in exactly the same format. So now we have comparanda, and at some point we can get a big database of all of this together. And of course, given the nature of these texts, the rhyme is one of the most compelling features. It's what in oral poetry and recitation remains in the ear. So, the Neograeca Medievi, a group came together in 1986 for its first conference in Köln. Since then, it's met 6 times more in various places in either Greece, sporadically, over the whole time, and now just formed an association, and I'm not fully authorized to invite you to work with all of them, but I'm certainly not out of place in saying that they would be delighted to work more with classicists at the point now that these texts from the period are entering the TLG, and if you look under the centuries, 15th, 16th, and 17th, you will find a number of titles that may be unfamiliar to classicists, but certainly right in the middle of our period. And the greatest project of this time, the current project rather, is the Grammar of Medieval Greek. We're finally going to get a grammar, and it's Horrocks and Holton at the University of Cambridge in England who are putting this grammar together. So now just looking ahead, we need more and improved editions for these texts. We need these texts to be in electronic format. The next text I've begun work on is called the Old and the New Testament, and it's the second longest text from this period, between 5,000 and 6,000 lines long. We need to standardize the ways we're going to tag and lemmatize and parse these texts, and it's going to be interesting in the TLG if they're going to be lemmatized and tagged. It's going to be a challenge for the people who've been working with classics until now. The dictionary and the grammar need to be completed. And there's been talk for many years of a grammar of the Cretan text, but again, it's hard to grasp these large projects till you have the texts available. We need new approaches to the questions of authorship and dating and the dialogue between texts. And we need good stylometry to investigate within texts and between texts. And we need new studies in English and new translations into other languages so that these texts can become known. And thus I invite you to offer any material help, suggestions, money, ideas, all of it, to creating better electronic texts and digital tools for the text of this very important period, to join in the momentum towards creating better OCR. We're thanks to Greg Crane, our text, the Old and New Testament, was sent up through the ranks of first Abi, then Anagnostis, the various OCR readers, to Bruce Robertson, and there's hope, but it's still in the future. We were very lucky. Maria Pandella decided to incorporate it in the TLG, and thus we can make real progress quickly. We need help from people who are mapping sources to transcriptions, and by this I mean not just line by line as in certain texts now, projects now, but word by word if possible, so that we can talk about orthography and whether words are kept together or separated by the scribes of their period. We need dynamic concordance making. I know everybody I talk to now in digital humanities says to me this is old hat, but we really need these concordances because to make better editions, we can't, we can do them for 10 years, get it over with if you don't want us to keep doing them, but they just have to be made. So I'm looking for people who are working with good programs that work with Polytonic Greek and make good concordances so I don't have to recreate the wheel. And we want to know the best current practices in the opinion of classicists for text analysis and statistics, and then we can really make some progress together. Just a very final note, I come to you as a young person in training for digital humanities and so on, but I really have been in this field since 1970. I was at the first meeting at the Hilton held when the TLG was deciding whether to type its texts in Greece or not, and they had already made a test, and they found that the typists were modernizing the texts, and they couldn't allow this, so they took them away to the Far East. And I also was there when the first Ibicus was delivered to Greece from David Packard, and it was set up at the American School in the apartment of Paul Clement, the great archaeologist, and I had he had a secretary that worked 9 to 5 or something. I had the 6 to midnight shift. And whenever the thing broke down, I would have to go down, we were just talking about phones from Athens in the old days, to the central phone office, and get on the phone to David Packard and read him out the code of numbers that had gone wrong. And then he'd say, okay, I'll call you back in a day. And he'd call back with a fix, and we'd sit behind the machine and play things in the right place. So that's all I can say to you today. Thank you.